Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Edge. Today we've got the lovely and bubbly Gina Yacone on. It was great to have you on before. Unfortunately, when we did it before, John wasn't available, but John is here today, so I'm sure we're going to have a really entertaining conversation. Rather than
Or
ask you to,
or does that mean it's bad cop, good cop? I'm not sure.
well,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
I'm the good cop, obviously.
I knew you were going to say that. But yeah, rather than ask you what your story is, because you did that on episode number 1, so I want to shout out to episode number 1. Give it a listen. I want to ask you really, I guess, what have you been doing since we last spoke? I mean, I know you kind of avoided me by getting sick at an event, so we never met face to face, and then you happened to come to the UK and I was somewhere else.
Wow, Jay.
It's one of those days today. But what's been happening in your life? Where have you been? What have you been up to? How has life been treating you?
Yeah. And just for the audience to know, I went to this event called Black Hat and DEF CON, and, I might have gotten, a little COVID or something
Yeah.
like that. So that's why I couldn't see, people around. It
We
wasn't like
will
I
meet, I'm
So
sure. We
she was
will meet.
thinking of you,
it
Jay. She was thinking of you. She didn't want to give you the COVID or whatever it was.
Yes, okay.
did, right?
Yeah.
I think it was a super spreader event like many of these have been.
And I'm sorry because
Exactly.
I know you were really sick, so I shouldn't make a joke about it, but I'm sure we will meet at some point.
We will. We 100% will. But, to be honest, since last year, it was around January that I was on, this podcast or this video casting. I've had whiplash. Like it is in terms of life goes so fast, especially in the world of cybersecurity. And I felt that I was having a nice cadence with my conference talks and talking with clients and my own clients in terms of what they're doing, and there seemed to be a little bit stability kind of evolving until the really kind of precedence of generative AI. And then since then it has been on a whirlwind with a bunch of companies going in and talking to them about what their either LLM strategy is, their AI strategy, their machine learning strategy, and how are they either protecting or building an AI center of excellence. And really the conversations have kind of turned because of all of these people's craving to have these productivity tools like something with generative AI, and that could be ChatGPT, or that could be Bard, or insert anything here. That can also be the implementation of Azure's Copilot. And so a lot of organizations had some type of, let's say, a requirement by their board is to at least look at and tell us what we could be doing to stay ahead of the curve, and or let's block it completely. So there's kind of those very it's like a dichotomy of thought there. On one side we have organizations that it's the wild west, utilize what you can, learn as fast as you can, and let's pivot, and fail fast and move on. And then others are like block and roll it out very slowly. So it's really kind of helping companies meet them where they are and kind of correcting course so that they are either, if they're blocking, that they're not inhibiting productivity at an organization wide because of the strict stance that they've taken. Maybe they're opening up to research and development or smaller pilots or doing better testing and kind of rolling out a better program with education and training, versus those companies that are so in, and with them it's really more along the lines of what are your use cases, and let's narrow that down. And let's not, when we're thinking about putting data into an LLM or where you're getting your data, that we're not putting in garbage data. And then we're thinking about residency, and we're thinking about classification of data and the security of data, so that your project doesn't have to be wiped one day because of something that's in there. So a lot of, I feel like I've been on a world tour talking to organizations about a lot about AI Center of Excellence, especially around security. In addition to that, I think I spoke around 24 times last year. My conference talks were mainly around API security, AI, of course, cybersecurity awareness and training, and tabletop exercises from incident response. And so I was just kind of doing a lot of like education at conferences and submitting a lot of calls for paper. And so it was fun year. It was a fun year, but I feel like my sleep has definitely suffered. I'm sure you guys have had the same, huh?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's certainly when you're traveling and you're changing time zones, and it sounds like before we had this, the record button, you've traveled to Europe. The sleep definitely takes a backseat, and I've been unfortunately having to use some of the pharmaceutical versions over the counter type to maintain a good sleep schedule, but it has been really hard. I want to circle back to AI. It is everywhere. It is like topic du jour. And I know you have a legal background. One of the areas that, and the excitement is harkens back to the 2000s with the advent of the internet. Do I block it? Do I let it go? And what is this thing going to become?
Or
I
the
think
cloud
AI,
too, really.
exactly. Yeah, I think AI is going to have a greater impact on us, just because of what it can do, and how it can enable in both offensive and defensive cybersecurity. Just as one aspect, but it goes a lot further. One of the areas I haven't heard a lot of conversation on is governance around AI. There's a lot of excitement around what it can do for us, but when you start to think about the potential of what it could do if we don't really pump the brakes or think ahead of what is the impact of this decision, governance really is an area that hasn't been talked a lot about. There are a few conversations out there. There's a book called The Great Wave, which really will scare the heck out of you in terms of what AI can do. And when you think about AI and you bring it together with what's going on in the biology sphere, and the impact of what we can do there. Talk to me a little bit about, have you heard anything around governance, or are people just rushing in like a gold rush?
Yeah, pretty much a gold rush. And we're putting in governance backwards, right? And some of that is also because some of the frameworks are still in like version 1 or weren't even out. And so when we look at some of the frameworks, if we're talking, well, I'll start with frameworks and then I'll talk about overall, let's say, organizational governance. So it's maybe 2 different spheres, right? So you have NIST, you can look at the MITRE framework, you can look at Google's framework, even like the EU, they have a framework around AI. And so taking some of those best elements and best practices into thinking about your program is an absolute necessity. So a lot of those frameworks are pretty broad in nature. Maybe not, MITRE, it's telling you what the attack is, and then you have to think about how to protect it. But, so let's say if we take NIST, for instance, it's more of like a broad, you should have, a charter, right? It doesn't really give into like the prescriptive nature of like what that should be. It's leaving it to the organization to lay out for them what their strategy is. With that said, at least that provides a little bit of a template of what an organization should start with. And like I said, there's frameworks that are out there. The best is to take the best practices of all, of course, and mold them into what you think is right for your organization based on the sensitivity of data, your assets, your organization's risk tolerance and posture, and all of those things. From a organizational perspective, there's a lot to be considered. So a lot of organizations, if they're really thinking about AI strategy, they at least have a charter in place with a group of people, of stakeholders, of different organizational stakeholders. So it might be somebody from VP of engineering, somebody from cyber, somebody from just, regular IT, maybe somebody from, a different, maybe from the data science team. And those people with some others would build up maybe their AI Center of Excellence as that kind of overarching kind of admin play that then would report to the board. With that said, even with those people in mind, it really comes down to right now, are organizations looking at it for a productivity tool for their employees? Or are they looking at it for internal projects to maybe optimize their mean time to recovery, or maybe understanding thresholds so that, they don't go over in cloud spend, or how they're utilizing models to optimize their tech stack. So right now, I think it's really, you have these boards, and these boards now are trying to figure out what internal projects versus what potential revenue driving projects that we can have in the organization that might be able to make the organization money based on what we're doing at an organizational level. Then that may splinter into two different subcategories of that committee, right? And those things are two different silos. Usually, if it's a revenue generating project, those seem to be funded very quickly, right? And where it's an internally facing, just like IT and cyber or whatever, those are a cost center. So it's a little bit more harder to get a budget. But right now there is a spend at most companies that are looking at AI for AI spend. And when we're thinking about security, we really have to think about the different architectural considerations. So that's thinking about how are we securing the LLM, how are we securing storage, how are we securing access, all the different layers. And then even with that, we have to be thinking about it, are we buying, are we building, and those have different security considerations and architecture considerations. And then, is it in the cloud? Is it on-prem? Is it here? Is it there? I feel like I'm Dr. Seuss right now, right? So it's a lot of things to think about, and it's a lot of money to consider. So really thinking about it holistically and making sure that really that you have quick wins, because you don't want to have a data science project where you're putting in a bunch of, let's say, garbage data, and then all of a sudden, that project has to be scrapped because your data set is really too corrupt because garbage in, garbage out. So making sure that it's done right, but being able to also show quick wins to the board so that they keep funding. Does that make sense?
I think a question
Yeah.
I've got, and it's a bit of a twofold question, I think, is obviously you've mentioned quick wins. Now, when I hear quick wins, a little bit of me gets nervous because I'm like, are we thinking about security, or are we just going for quick wins? And that leads me on to kind of the second part of the question. So the first part really is, are people thinking about security when they're doing this, or are they just kind of going full steam ahead? And the second part of the question is, have you seen anything done well? Like, have you seen any projects where they've got a quick win and it's been successful? And obviously you don't need to mention particular companies, but are people thinking of security, and what's been successful? What have you seen work?
Yeah. So I would say most companies do not realize the true risk. Because, this phenomenon, if we think about it, really, like in terms of its, peak, I started really researching it in the beginning of the summer, and, we know when OpenAI came out, but I really wasn't playing with it until like maybe the spring of last year. And even then I was kind of in and I was out. And then it took me one conference talk to get kind of inspired in June of last year. But I would say most people in cybersecurity, executives and stuff, really weren't starting to hear about it until late summer, if not fall. And if we think about it, we're now in February, And even then, you know, with the holidays and the world, we have so much noise. So are people slowing down enough to truly understand how AI plays into data and how data plays into identity and how identity really needs to be cleaned up in an organization to really help an AI project, right? And the actual aspect of the dependencies to make a successful one, I don't think it's realized. And if it's realized because it was realized because it's a rush and we're blocking, as opposed it's realized because somebody has spent enough time researching, like I do every day, thinking and reading and doing this. I spending every day thinking about it and going to organizations and saying, hey, listen, here's your blind spots and here's the silos, and these are why you guys need to work together, because this is going to impact the SOC and, you know, or Security Operations Center for those on the audience, you know, and how this might impact the SOC if there's too many alarms, if you turn this on, and this is, you know, reporting back to the SOC and thinking about things holistically, you know. And when we're thinking about even, you know, DSPM tools, which is data security posture management tools, you know, that DSPM tool should be one and parcel with any AI initiative, especially that it's employee facing, because that will really show you where a lot of the document creep is and or the identity creeps are very quickly. So pairing that with a Copilot rollout. And if you are just, you know, rolling out Copilot without thinking about a data posture management tool, then you haven't done your research, right? You haven't seen the true risks that are out there and are covering, you know, the potential for an insider, and or if a bad actor did get in and could then go in and utilize one of your employees, you know, over privileged accounts to then write a quick script on something like Copilot, point it at something, and, you know, get the data in seconds. It's quicker now, right? The barrier of entry is lower. So the aspect to security, I think we're learning still. How about that? And I think that there are some people that still think it's hype, just like they thought with the cloud. They probably thought that with the internet, right? They think that with Taylor Swift, right? Like it's everything's great. So, you know, things, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, it's just hype still, right? It'll die down. But the thing is that cybersecurity leaders have to get in front of it now, because the exponential growth of data, especially when right now you can have ML or machine learning and AI projects, artificial intelligence projects with internally facing data that might not be like generating tons and tons of data, you know, exponentially. But when you start bringing in generative AI to help with productivity tools and productivity assignments with marketing or with sales or even with research, you know, professors or, you know, researchers around, that's going to produce like 10x, 100 times X, 1,000 times X of data so quickly. How are you storing it? How are you protecting it? What are your log retention, you know, on it? And that goes down to having the brilliance and the basics. And most organizations that I've seen, you know, their data strategy, you know, they're so focused on their critical assets that have data, but they've never really mastered the data classification, data retention, data controls that have been needing. And even when we look at the critical asset, we're like, okay, well, this asset in my organization is the most critical, it's most revenue driving. Even then, most organizations, you know, struggle with the dependencies on that, like the API that connects it. They don't even consider that critical asset, even though if that asset was attacked by a bad actor, it would take down their most critical asset. And the supply chain is right there. So we have to, one, be better. We have to understand our organization more, and we have to slow down. We have to slow down in many regards. In terms of your quick wins question, I didn't forget. Yes, I am seeing some quick wins. They're so narrowly focused though, Jay, they're like, it's really thinking about, and it's things that they can already measure in their organization to then like scale up. And it's more on IT operations. That's really the main focus right now, is like IT operations. It might be around backups. It might be around availability. It might be around, some type of logs. Maybe it is even around like understanding from like a content delivery network, how things are, spun up and things. But it's more about seeing how those logical connections and rules, and even then it's probably more around machine learning than, let's say, the actual like AI that a lot of people are thinking about. So those technologies have been around for a long time. It's just that organizations, because of the AI talk, they're getting funding. So these ML projects or machine learning projects are finally kind of taking off, that are helping, maximize different departments.
So
Yeah,
I
would
could
agree with you.
spend. Sorry, go on. You go, John.
No, I would agree with you. I mean, the smaller projects are the ones that are much needed, especially in IT operations. How is my network performing? Are my backups successfully recovering? It's that time-intensive work that we humans are not good at, because we see a squirrel and then we're like, oh wait, what's up with that? And I think that you're right. And you look at the industry, and that's where the focus is. The security companies are coming out with tools like a co-pilot. That term, I know it's associated with Microsoft often, but that's really what it will be. If you are a security person, I need somebody to go search the latest net flow and correlate it with what's going on with the firewall, so on and so forth. I think that's really where the value is going to be initially. But long term, to your point, it's all about the data. Because if you can get to the data, that's where you can either corrupt it, or companies more and more often are going to put data in there that is sensitive, that hasn't been masked, that hasn't been properly secured. So if today, if a hacker gets into your network, they got to go search around, so on and so forth. So are there recommendations, that you provide to, people you're talking to around best practices and how to secure that data?
Yeah, so really great question. I mean, of course, it depends on the organization's environment, and the project that they're trying to, work on. If we're thinking like something like a Microsoft Copilot, I think what the biggest kind of first step would be is to really start with a very small pilot that can really break it and see, and that has to be not just from like IT. That should be like one person from different kind of categories, because what we're seeing with like Microsoft Copilot is when you are, let's say, you want to build a PowerPoint, and you want it to put it at the shared drive. You can just have it you just write a prompt, and it pulls things so quickly. And so you're basically phishing your shared drive for information. And so you need people to, go out there who can in a way do that technical testing and understands how to then write up a report to show where they found the weaknesses and report it up. But most likely, there are tools like the data posture management tools that can show easily where dormant data is, where, overprivileged, people are, and that could be very quickly cleaned up prior to implementation and rollout of something like a Copilot or any type of project where you're doing an enterprise wide with all of your employees. In terms of, when we're thinking about like an LLM project, really it goes down to, are you going to be on-prem? Are you going to be in the cloud? How are you connecting it? And what kind of already do you have? What kind of considerations do you have in place? What is your, usually that's your internally facing data as well. But, you're right. Like you want to make sure what's going into that system is going to be as clean as possible if that becomes like your golden library. And if it's not, you should, you can have like maybe let's call it a garbage LLM, right? You can work in one of those sandbox environments, but you have to make sure that, even that is very secure from a bad actor perspective. I was talking to somebody and they were like, well, ours is internally facing, so we don't really have to worry about security. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, cute.
Yeah. And if you're an employee that's been at
But
a
that's
company
how
for a
people
long
are
time.
still thinking, right?
Yeah,
People still
exactly.
think, oh, it's on premise, it's safe. And
No.
that is so false. And those people, it's just sad.
Yeah,
They're going to be
I
making.
Well, there's
So-
a whole and one more question. There's a whole aspect of employee training as well, because you mentioned SharePoint or the what is it, the share drive on that OneDrive that Microsoft has. I may have put personal information in there. I may have if
yeah.
I haven't trained my employees, they may have banking information, their health information. They're just doing what they've always been doing
Of course.
and never really thought about it. And now, hey, gosh, that's now data for AI to consume, and it's going to spit out results on that. So I think even getting down and running a program to train your employees, just like we do with phishing, we're going to have to do that pretty quickly, because that data, I can tell you from experience of, working in an enterprise and seeing some of these drives, there's a lot of stuff in there that shouldn't be there.
A lot of stuff that shouldn't be in there. And, this is one area that I would say most companies, I don't know why they don't invest in, and that's why last year I did a couple talks on cybersecurity awareness training was to this point, because I think a lot of companies think it's obvious. I don't know. They do not realize the importance of training and then continuous training, especially in these future generation and innovative tech areas and how they impact the company. And really that, that's the CIO, the CTO, and the CISO that really need to all come together on what that looks like. For me, I think training is one of the most important and cost-effective ways to promote cybersecurity training. And also, it allows people to understand the why the company is doing things, but then they get to go home and utilize some of those cybersecurity hygiene practices to teach their kids or their elderly parents. And so when we think about the trickling effect, it's not only that they become data champions and security champions for our org, they also get to learn something new and empowers them. They get to look smart in front of their family. They're not getting their news off of TikTok. Oh my gosh, right? They're actually being able to utilize that. And it's also when you do training based on phishing, based on data loss prevention, based on physical security, whatever that is, it also reduces the amount of alarms that are in the security operations center. And when you have a security operations center, you should know how much an alarm costs per alarm per person, right? Because that's a people cost. And so if you do some very quick, either hire somebody or have a champions program or do something, and it's like, every couple of months, a $5,000 seminar to talk about the latest and greatest, and then that could reduce your alarms by, 10%, 20%. That's a ROI savings. However, for some reason, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because, security training or training in general seems to be more of like a soft, like girl skill. I don't know, but for some reason, most organizations don't embrace it and celebrate it in the way that it could make a financial ROI impact. And right now we need it more than ever. We've been going into a lot of companies because the companies don't want to teach, they don't want to be the bad guy on AI. So they have us come in and say, hey, let's show you what's happening in the world of AI and all the bad stuff. And that this is why we've advised your company to do X, Y, and Z, but they've created a portal that you can put in your questions and your use cases, and this is how it's going to go. And so, and then so many people are like, oh my gosh, thank you. We've been wondering what our company is doing about AI. We've been asking for this. And it's like, it's too late. Like, it has been too late to start AI training. Like, it needed to be started, last fall. People are not getting to it. And right now, that's why you're going to have shadow IT. That's why you're going to have improper, implementations of Copilot where people are going to be pointing at OneDrive, looking at, John, your personal files, right? And maybe not. But do you know what I mean? Like, who knows? Because at the speed of light, something like AI can find something if there was something that was provisioned by the IT team incorrectly for that person. So
I was going to say I want to pivot a little bit, but I think it's so connected. Like, we've spoken for 30 odd minutes on AI, and we haven't yet brought zero trust into the mix, right? And part of me is concerned about that. Part of me still thinks that zero trust is imperative to the world we live in today, and it's critical, and maybe even more critical now we talk about AI and maybe given like people are over and provisions, got too much access, etc., like that. But what I'm concerned about is AI is the new buzzword. It's the new thing. People want to be trained on it. People want to talk about it. It's definitely more exciting than the concept of zero trust because people love to play with it, and we've got ChatGPT and equivalents, and people understand it. People talk about it. People know about it. And zero trust as a bit of a negative word in itself. Zero trust. We don't trust you. But for me, it's critical, even more so, as I've just said. What are your thoughts on that? Are people still talking about zero trust? Is it still something people are considering? Or is it now people have moved on? It's forgotten. It's dead technology. And like, let's get involved in AI and machine learning and all this other stuff. How do you feel about it?
oh my God, I can't wait for the first vendor to come and see me and be like, I've got this zero trust AI, machine learning, LLM solution for you. Like, it's going to be on like one slide deck, and I'm going to be like,
Well, it's just waiting for you at
out.
RSA.
I'm going to be like, bye, out of my face. No, they absolutely have, they're different buyers right now, completely different buyers right now in many regards. I do not think, the zero trust, and I'm not going to say zero trust. How about the SASE or SSE architecture is a very top of mind for all IT and cyber teams. We always knew that was a slow roll in terms of, the SD-WAN project, the zero trust access, those do take time to implement. I'm hoping to see maybe some acceleration when we're thinking about the different domains of what make up, SSE and SASE. I do see a lot of last year, and we're going to see, I think this year, more implementation, definitely around SD-WAN. Zero trust access has, I feel like that's kind of a table stakes now. The cloud security access broker and other types of things, when we're thinking about, especially these like plugins for these productivity generative AI tools, they're being utilized. When we think about, and these are like, when we even think about the subdomains that make up zero trust, and SASE, we think about data loss prevention. I mean, that is, when we're thinking about, the future of data and we're thinking about what that means, that has absolutely its, place in society. Where I'm not 100% convinced, at least not with, let's say, commercial or enterprise, non-federal government for the United States, if they will actually implement like the NIST framework and do assessments off of that, right? I'm not sure there, as opposed to, like, I think some will, right? Because they're maybe, federally, adjacent, and they have to kind of prove things out. But I don't think it's going to take on like having a NIST Common Security Framework or a NIST CSF or a NIST 853 or having your ISO certification, every year. I just don't know if that framework assessment is going to take off like the others, but the concepts around the architecture and the ideas of how it is, and when we think about how a bad actor would get into the network and blocking them in all areas, I think that that's still very, very relevant and completely at play.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when we consider data exfiltration, I mean, like we've said, if we're collecting all this data together and making it easier to access, then zero trust comes into my mind, because you definitely only want the people that should access it accessing it, and not just everybody. And if somebody tries to exfiltrate it or move it around the network or whatever, you want to make sure that's not possible. So in my mind, it's still pretty imperative.
It is, but you can't use the words.
Yeah. No, I'm just concerned because, I mean, obviously I live the other side of the ocean, right? So the whole zero trust kind of movement got here later than it did in the US, because it travels across, right? But you guys are already talking a lot about AI, and myself and John are off to RSA soon. When we were there that last year, it was every vendor was either AI or zero trust. And I wonder what it's going to be like this year. Is it going to be more than 50-50? Is it going to be more AI, less zero trust? I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen.
I think it'll be more AI. It'll be more AI. That's the gold rush right now. That's where VCs are flinging their money, and that's the hotness right now. It's the Taylor Swift.
It's a Taylor Swift. I definitely implore you guys to, like, for me, I go to those, of course, we've all been to those conferences. I actually am going to the fringes. I go to the back and I see what they're doing.
Yeah,
and
that's the good advice.
And for like last year at Black Hat, it was around data and how it's tying into the identity. And when we're thinking about, AI and for every time I'm in an incident response, right? The first thing, what was the data? Who had access, right? It's the same question. That question has been around since the tale of time, right? So when we think about an incident response, those are your first questions. And we think about, with AI, okay, AI, if somebody had access, who would have access? And there's tools that can show you that now, right?
Yeah.
The observability aspect to that is here. And now don't point it at your entire network. It would be so noisy. But if you, land and expand, your attack surface will minimize exponentially, decreasing, your risk. And that's, utilizing it from data. But
I think my biggest concern is I can guarantee for most companies, if you say, what is the data and who had access to it, they're going to go, we don't know.
Right. Yeah. And that's, yeah. Well, the DSPM tools also have the discovery aspect to it too. They do the discovery, the classification, they find out it's structured data, unstructured data. They can help you classify it. They can show you has access to it. And so,
and I think for me, that's the foundation for everything we've talked about today is if you don't know what your crown jewels are, or you at least don't know what the periphery of those are and what's connected, as you mentioned, you got no hope of either securing that by only allowing the right people have access to it, and you don't know if somebody's taken it because you don't know what it is, right? And
Yeah.
that is, for me, where everybody really needs to start is somebody needs to own those crown jewels and say, we know what they are, we know who should have access to it, and we know what is around it that keeps it running or keeps it in location or provides that data, whatever it may be. All of those things. And so few companies are actually there, right?
Yeah, but Jay, we all know that the crown jewels are in an Excel file in your OneDrive, and it's spread across the entire company. So that's the truth. I mean, as much as SAP runs the ERP, we all know that every company runs on Excel.
Yeah. I've just looked at the clock and time's absolutely flown past, and I want to get to some fun questions because I know you've been traveling, but I want to thank you for coming on, and let's not leave it another year until you come back, right?
Let's put it on the schedule, man.
That's what I do. I will ping you directly after this and get you locked in for another one. But I know you traveled. I missed you when you came this side of the ocean. So I guess I've got a twofold question. I'd like to know the best place you went when you were in Europe and the best food you ate when you were here.
Oh man. That's
And
such
please
a
don't say pineapple on pizza, right?
Oh, I didn't have that.
He's still after it.
One of the things that I loved about Europe in December, and I had to go to London for work for the audience, and then I did some travel for the holidays. But it was just the spirit of the holiday. And regardless if you celebrate Christmas or others, it was just that. I mean, I literally got off the plane and it just felt like the spirit of community everywhere, the lights and the hustle and bustle and all of that. And it was absolutely phenomenal. So I loved, of course, London, but for me, I think it was the Christmas markets in Nuremberg and in Munich, and walking around the traditional Christmas markets, drinking the mulled wine and just enjoying being outside, having that sense of community with everybody, walking around and, visiting some of the museums on the weekends and things like that, and some of the arts. It was just absolutely wonderful. But I live in Colorado and we have some amazing, Christmas displays. We actually have a Christmas market. We have a couple, but the size and complexity of that over there, it really touches my heart. I don't know where you guys store it though. I'm trying to figure it out. I feel like, is it underground? It's like the Christmas, there's all the Christmas stuff go underground and then comes up, because there was so much Christmas.
Yeah.
So I would say it was the spirit of the holidays, just in general. Seeing all the families together was just beautiful. I also traveled to Spain and I got to see, Gaudi's church, which is my favorite church. I'm not going to butcher it. I'm going to butcher its name, so I'm not going to. Yeah.
And did you go to the Gaudi house as well?
I didn't.
Next time you're there, definitely do that. It's neat.
And I think for me, it was all the seafood.
In Spain, I guess,
geez.
right?
Yeah.
Spain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So good.
I was going to say, did you prefer kind of the German food or the Spanish food? But that they are very different, and I love both. I mean, I'm a fan of the food in Germany, and I got to go to Munich a few times last year. Unfortunately, not at Christmas time, but I have been to the Christmas market there, and it is phenomenal. But equally, I was in Barcelona at the end of the year as well, and the weather was definitely nicer there than it was in England at the time. We managed to sit on the beach and have some tapas, so it was great. But over to you, John. I'll let you wrap up with a fun question.
No, I was just going to say, Jay, I was in Toronto last week, and one of the better meals I had was with Yacone Graham, and we enjoyed Thai food, and it was fried rice out of a pineapple.
So I am going to, Gina, I've never asked you this question and I was trying to avoid it, but I'm going to ask it anyway, right? So
Pineapple everywhere.
pineapple on
Yes,
pizza, is
team
that
pineapple.
No.
Yes.
I put pineapple on my burger, pineapple on my pizza. I'm
Well,
from Florida.
yes.
No.
When you're from Florida and the beaches, everything is like
There you
citrus
go.
fruits, and you put, yeah, absolutely.
So
Give
you
it
know,
some-
Jay, at RSA, we're having
Oh,
pineapple
I knew you were
pizza.
going to bring that
We're
up.
gonna. I mean, we may do a LinkedIn Live just to really rub it in.
Yeah.
Ooh.
No,
Would that be fun?
I mean, like I said, Gina, it's been great having you on. I can't believe it was a year. I did a little bit of research before we came on. I stalked you a little bit on LinkedIn and I looked back and I'm like, wow, it was really that long ago. So thank you for everything you're doing in the industry. Thank you for coming on and talking
It's
to us.
you though.
I
mean, you guys have been killing it as well. Thank you guys for what you guys have been doing in the industry. You know, it's definitely reciprocal. You know, it's amazing. I think that's why I think I love you guys so much, is because the amount I feel like we're kindred spirits in that way. We try to give back to the community and educate, to make our world a safer place. And it's something that we're all very passionate about. And sometimes I think, at least for me, sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough. And you know, I could work my way into some burnout every once in a while because of that. But, you know, it is because, you know, of the few people who, you know, are willing to do, you know, communities of interest, either that's with, you know, the, you know, Cloud Security Alliance, or if that's with, you know, ISSA or ISACA, you know, or others that are out there and being a part of, you know, what's happening in zero trust or AI and trying to move the needle. It's really important to get this content and information out there. So thank you guys as well for what you guys are doing in the community. And hopefully 2024, you know, even if we can change some minds to moving in the right secure direction, then we'll be protecting, you know, people's data and, you know, potentially people's lives, because, you know, when we think about, you know, critical infrastructure and the future of maybe where cyber is going, you know, the table stakes might be getting higher. And so it takes us to continuously push. And so thank you guys as well.
No, thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Of course.